So let us continue now with our discussion of the Enclave culture. What does the Enclave provide? It provides a kind of separate culture, a culture that doesn't tick in the same way as the culture outside the Enclave, that has its own set of norms, its own set of recipes for negotiating the way of everyday life. They out there have their rules, and we in here live according to our rules. We wish that the world was the way it is in here, but the world is not yet that way. So here we are in our enclave. The world outside is deplorable. Someday we might be able to make a change of that ever-lurking risk that surrounds us. But in the meantime, it is the purpose of the enclave to inform its insiders of A, how good it is in here, and B, how risky, how dangerous it is out there. And what it is that separates us, if it isn't really a physical wall as it might have been in the original ghettos, a wall created by the outside that wanted to keep us excluded. Now the outside excludes us by its norms, its culture, its negative values. And we surround ourselves, we in the enclave, not with real walls, but with what Sivan calls a wall of virtue, meaning that out there are the bad people. In here, among us, are the good people. Now, of course, as I've said many times already, there are boundary problems because the world is an open society, increasingly, and boundaries are easily crossed. Nothing keeps somebody living in the back alleys of Jerusalem if he wants to go to Tel Aviv. Nothing keeps someone in a small town in Virginia if he wants to come to Manhattan, or in a neighborhood in Brooklyn if he just wants to get on the subway, he's there, or an airplane, he's there. There's no place that is out of reach. Yes, there are economic difficulties, but in fact, as we've already said, it's possible to traverse all kinds of boundaries. So the boundaries, the fact that the problem of boundaries is so real, in a way helps the culture war, because it energizes the beliefs and the believers. For they have to create inside of themselves and inside their fellow believers the conviction that the boundary is real and dangerous, that it is perhaps invisible, but that it is unmistakable. Those inside are the virtuous, the good, the morally upright. They are the ones who will receive the moral rewards. They are the ones specially chosen by God. They are the ones who live for the holy cause. They are the true Bible believers. They are true to whatever their prophets demanded of them. And the outsiders are polluted, an ever-lurking risk. The world looks seductive, but it is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And it's very important, and often we find inside these enclaves people who have once been outside. As I said the other day in class, there's no one more powerful in his or her belief than a convert. And as we'll see, this is true in almost all of the groups that we'll look at. There have been people who say, I once was lost, but now I'm found. I once was blind, but now I see. I've been there. I've done that. I know what is wrong about it. They will talk, for example, about the freedoms outside, are the hedonism of an egotistical and selfish generation, that the outside is not really freedom. For example, the woman who is veiled will say, I feel freer inside because I am not a sex object in the world outside. I can walk through public space and I am protected. My dignity is protected. In fact, the law is often invoked as the instrument of maintaining that virtue. So among the Jews, it's called halakha, the way, the law. Among Muslims, it's called sharia. The law serves, the religious law serves to maintain the virtue of those inside, those who follow the law. So the law is not just the law, it is protection. Now, because the state, in a sense, has more power today in the modern world than religion, the state is superior to religion. The state is sometimes controlled by religion, but in most cases, the state is above religion. That was the great change that came about during the period of enlightenment. The state said that all citizens, regardless of their religion, regardless of their race, regardless of their creed, regardless of where they came from, are equal before civil law. Now, that's, of course, not always practiced in many states, and there are a few states that are quite as democratic as those of the West. But because the power of the state, because it is this superior power politically, the people who live within the enclave often have to challenge the power of the state, either to create a defensive perimeter where the state cannot go. It can't go in our private schools. If it goes in public schools, then we will live in private schools. It can't determine who our religious leaders are, because only religion can determine who is a rabbi, who is a mullah, who is an imam, who is a priest, who is a minister. It cannot control our family values. Only our religion control our family values. So sometimes there's an effort to create a perimeter, and that perimeter has to be maintained by diminishing any feelings of sympathy for the other. You can't sympathize with the outside world, because sympathy can lead to empathy, empathy can lead to compromise, and from there it's the slippery slope towards heresy and a lack of and loss of faith. So sometimes the perimeter is created by defense, and then, as we've seen, we talk about activism, sometimes it's created by offense. Another element of these enclaves is they provide all kinds of services for the insiders. Emotional services, charitable services. Many of these groups, whether it's Hamas, whether it's the Christian fundamentalists, whether it is the Jewish fundamentalists, all of them begin by providing tutoring, health clinics, support. They create this sense of solidarity, and that too is part of what makes the enclave such a positive place to live. Inside the enclave, you feel you're more than a number. You're not anonymous. Everybody knows who you are. They know where you belong. You do things that are similar. You eat similar foods. You operate according to a similar calendar. You dress the same, perhaps. You speak the same language. You ban the same kinds of behavior. You have deeply held relationships and friendships. Often you intramarry. The idea of marrying outside the enclave is, of course, discouraged. You view history in the same way. You have the same sense of how the world is going to end and how history will develop. So there is within the enclave an enormous amount of solidarity, which explains one of the real attractions of fundamentalism. Fundamentalism has a feeling that all the believers not only live together physically, but they live together morally. Now, of course, there are always splits, and small towns, we know, tend to have a great many splits. So what happens when somebody inside seems to be weakening, or seems to have made compromises, or has gone too far and too often to the outside? So one of the things that these enclave cultures do is they very often are forced to banish someone, kick out the people who are not true to the values of the insider. So one of the things, it's destructive, it's also dangerous, and that is, how do we keep purifying ourselves? So very often you first turn on the outsiders, and then you turn on the insiders. And we have said already here that for fundamentalists groups, very often the insider who seems to have compromised just a little bit turns out to be a greater danger, a greater enemy than the outsider. And of course, another important way of keeping insiders in is don't give them skills to succeed outside, make them economically interdependent with those inside, stress the charisma of that extraordinary power of insider leaders, and charisma is one of the ways in which people can keep insiders within the enclave. Sometimes that charisma can run amok, as in the case of Jonestown, where this was a group of fundamentalists, Christian fundamentalists, went off to Guyana, tried to keep themselves separate, and when they felt that they were attacked, they were always under the control of this charismatic leader, Jim Jones. And ultimately, when he lost it, they all lost it, and we all know the result was that mass suicide. The enclave, and with this I'll end talking about enclaves, is not static, but in a constant process of negotiation. They keep redefining what does it mean, where are the boundaries, what do you have to do to be on an inside, and it's always determined by what's going on outside. As long as we can articulate the dangers of the outside, we can keep people on the inside. And that inside is described many, many times from a variety of points of view. The norms can change even. What was permitted yesterday might be prohibited today. In the past we said, yes, well, we think it's okay to go to college. No, tomorrow we say, no, we can't even do that. So these are the subjects that you should be clear about as you read through the essay by Sivan. And then when you have finished that and you feel that you know it well, you'll probably want to go back to it when we get to the other sections of the course. In my next two lectures, 5 and 6, I will try to review the elements, the essentials of fundamentalism in a very succinct fashion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, and then you'll have those. And again, I want to stress that this first section of the paper is the most important, and you will probably want to rewrite it. All of these should be emailed by the latest on Sunday, October 3rd.